this morning. John Travolta has led the tributes to the acting and music legend Dame Olivia Newton-John, who's died aged 73 in California after a long battle with breast cancer.
Yeah, there's a real sense of sadness this morning. Her starring role as Sandy in the film version of Grease was the one that obviously brought her worldwide fame, but she'd been going a long time before that, and she sold millions of records through her lifetime. Ross King is in Los Angeles. Ross, John Travolta, as we said that her impact had been just incredible. You were very lucky enough out there to have met her many times. I'll repeat the question I asked you earlier this morning. What was she like?
She was an amazing lady, yeah, and I really do feel lucky to have worked with her and then also to have spent some time socially with her as well. The best way to describe her, Richard, was that she was everything you wanted her to be. You know, she was talented, she was fun, she was beautiful, and she was just a lovely lady. She treated everyone exactly the same way. She did so much for the world of country music to pop music, movies too. There really isn't anyone you can meet that hasn't seen the movie Grease. And of course, the millions she raised for cancer research too is just unbelievable. But for a lot of people, Grease will always be the word.
Now, back to our main news, and tributes for the actress Olivia Newton-John have been flooding in from right around the world. From those that were inspired by her, those that worked with her, and also many of those who were lucky enough to call her a dear friend, including the actress Jane Seymour, who I'm delighted to say joins us now. Good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Good morning.
I want to say I'm so sorry because I know that she was a great friend of yours. It must have been, you know, extremely sad news when you heard about what had happened. And she was such an icon, wasn't she?
She was an amazing woman, and I knew her, gosh, I knew her from the time I first came to America. I came out to America and stayed with her sister, Rona, and we got to know each other. We both had children around the same time. We shared a lot of ups and downs. We had very kind of sort of an interesting kind of parallel in our lives. And I also saw quite a lot of her recently while she was really ill, and she was in a lot of pain, and it was really tough to see. I mean, she's such a fighter. No one imagined she'd ever, manage to keep going as long as she did. But like she used to say to me, I'm a thriver, not a survivor, and she supported everything I ever did. She was just, all she cared about was, what was my life like? How were my kids? How was life going on? And we'd sit together in her back garden and just look at the hummingbirds. And she just, I wrote a couple of pictures of her the last time. I don't know if you can see these.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
And good. But, she was very ill at that time. And anyway, she was a really special person, She changed the world, I think, in many ways, especially in terms of what she did with cancer. I mean, she basically, instead of hiding things in her life, she opened up and said, hey, this is what I've got. This is what's happening. This is what it looks like. And then when it came back again and then again, I mean, she was very open. And when I spoke to one of her family today, I said, if I talk about her, is this something I should or shouldn't say? And they said, you know what? She laid it all out there. She cared about everybody else. She made a huge difference. Her legacy is extraordinary, not just as a performer, but as a friend and a champion of people who are dealing with cancer. And I know from a personal level that she was so helpful to me, was someone very close to me who's been going through it.
We knew, of course, those of us in the wider world, we knew that she had had this battle for 30 years now and had kept winning it again and again and again. But I have to say, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of our viewers here, when I got the ping on the phone last night telling me that she died, I was quite shocked because I didn't know that she was that close. You mentioned that you saw a lot of her in her final weeks, so you presumably, it didn't come as a shock to you. This was expected, was it?
Yes, I think so. Actually, the interesting thing is that I thought she was going to pass many years ago. I mean, about 2 or 3 years ago, I remember being with her, and I just thought this is the last time I'm ever going to see her. She was skeletal and frail and in a lot of pain. And I just thought, I'm going to get that call next week. And she just kept coming back. She just kept bouncing back. And I think, she loved life. She loved her husband, her daughter. She hung in there a really, really long time, and she was in so much pain. And those of us who knew her at the end, I think, we didn't want her to go, but at the same time, it was, it wasn't a life anymore for her.
No, I mean, I was reading about how, she was in a wheelchair at one point and she learnt how to walk again. You know, she obviously had that determination that she wanted to make the most of every moment.
Yes, very much so. And, you know, I remember when she first had the back problem, because she'd called me from Vegas when she was performing there. And she said, Jane, you know, what do I do? My back's hurting. You know, who knew that was actually cancer in her spine, which was devastating. But, you know, John was and has always been incredible, really helped her through it. You know, he's an expert in herbs and all kinds of alternative medicine as well. And, you know, she lived in peace. The last time I sat there was, you know, at the back, and she didn't know I was coming. She got the day wrong. And somehow she got into some sort of clothes and came out. And she just kept looking around. She said, look at those hummingbirds, you know, look at the sky, look at nature. Isn't it beautiful? And that, you know, she just grabbed every moment.
Looking back at more happier times, and as you say, you've known her since 1976. I mean, you know, you've known her for forever, really. I often think that one of the most attractive aspects of an attractive person is, be it a man or a woman, that they don't know that they're attractive. They don't actually sort of accept it or know it. Did she realise quite how beautiful she was?
No, I don't think so. I think she had bits she used to try and hide, you know. She'd say, oh, I can't wear that, you know, I don't want people seeing that part of my body. And like, Olivia, you're just drop dead gorgeous. You're beautiful. No, I think what was so lovely about Olivia was she was really humble. I mean, she was very down to earth. I mean, she was just like, you know, and she was a real Aussie too, you know, she was very down to earth, Aussie English, I'd like to think. And, yeah, and she did everything for her family, everything. She was the most generous person.
I wish I'd met her. I wish I'd interviewed her. It never happened. It was a real... I always regretted it, actually, as the years went by. But that publicity picture, I don't know if you can see it at your end. Let's just show it again, the one of her in the denim shirt. There's a picture we're showing here. It was a very famous poster of her in the 1970s. She's just looking at the camera. She's backlit by sunshine. Her hair's down. She's wearing a denim shirt. And I was saying earlier in the programme that poster was on the wall of the radio station that I used to work in back in the 70s. And it used... And I'm not exaggerating, it basically stopped traffic in the corridor. It was up there for months. And even after months, the guys would stop and just look at it and just sort of get lost in her beauty. And I would have loved to have told her that. What was she like about her talent? How did she rate herself as a singer?
Oh, she loved singing. I mean, she was passionate about it. And no, I think she knew she was really good. And but she also had the privilege of working with wonderful producers and had just great songs. I mean, such amazing classics. And you know, she loved to sing. I mean, that was her passion, really, very much so. That and horses.
And also, she had her foundation, didn't she? The Olivia Newton-John Foundation. Yes. I know the family have asked for donations to be made to that instead of flowers, and it was dedicated to researching plant medicine and cancer, and she sort of really wanted to give something back, didn't she, as a, you know, from what she was going through?
Yes, very much so. And in fact, I had the privilege when I was filming in Australia of actually going to Melbourne and visiting her cancer hospital there, which is remarkable. And then not long after that, I remember her saying, I can't believe it. She said, I was in Australia and suddenly I found myself at my hospital, but as a patient. And she said, you know, as devastating as that was, she said, I was just so proud of you know, what a lot of people helped me support and helped me make happen. So she was very proud of the work she did there. And, you know, she gave so much to so many and never stopped. You know, cancer was her big thing. And so many of us deal with cancer or know people who are dealing with it. It's a miserably difficult journey. And, you know, to have such a bright light as her say, come on, you can do it. We can do it. You know, right up to the end is remarkable.
What I really like about your friendship with her, Jane, if I can say so, is that it wasn't sort of formed on the red carpet, you know, or at some sort of Hollywood club. It was because of your father, who actually delivered her sister's baby. And that's how you...
Yes.
So where did you first meet her? So where did you actually first meet Olivia?
Well, I mean, the funny part, I came home one day in Hillingdon where I lived, and my father was a doctor at Hillingdon Hospital. John Frankenberg said, oh, I just had this patient. She's gorgeous and she sings and she just had a baby and she looked like a supermodel immediately afterwards. I can't believe it. And then she came for dinner, Rona, And Rona said, "Oh, I'm going to stay with Olivia, my sister." And I told my father, "Olivia also sings." My father had said, I said, "No, she is the singer." But anyway, long story short, I went to America. We lived together. I helped her look after her son, Emerson. And then I met Olivia and I was in awe. It's like, oh my gosh, she's a superstar. What do I do? Or what do I say? And she was so down to earth and lovely. And then I remember I had a baby. I had my first baby, Katie, and I was on the beach and I went to visit her in Malibu because she wanted to see me and the baby. And I've never got this moment. She looked at me, she held my baby, held Katie, and then she looked at me and she said, "How do you do this?" And I said, "What do you mean? Have a baby?" We all know how to do that. And she said, No, how do you do this? How do you have a career like you have or like I have and have a baby? How do you do this? And that was our relationship. It was all about how do you balance the pressures of being what she was and having a child and traveling and having to make, putting it all together. And my son, Sean, who was closer to Chloe's age, ended up directing Chloe in her first music video. So, and I'll never forget this because my son's directing and wrote it, and there's Chloe and Olivia's there, doing the hair and makeup, making sure Chloe's really good behind the scenes, and I'm behind the scenes moving, trucks and equipment and everything. And so, we were very supportive of that.
Well, so there are those who say that our greatest gifts in life are our friends. And if that's true, and I think it probably is, then you had a wonderful gift, didn't you, for a very long time?
Oh, my gosh. A gift that will go on giving for the rest of my life. I just feel her with me all the time. And I'm just so privileged to have known her all that time.
Well, thank you so much, Dame, for sharing your memories with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
We do indeed. It's been great to talk to you. Thanks so much. Jane Seymour there talking about her dear friend, Olivia Newton-John. Thank you. Celebrities and fans around the globe are mourning the loss of acting legend Olivia Newton-John, who's died aged 73, and touching tributes have been pouring in.
Amongst them, one from an Australian presenter, Richard Wilkins, who this morning broke down on live television in Australia when he was talking about his very dear friend Olivia. He knew her very well. In fact, he was related to her by marriage. Just to see that moment. Totally understandable. I have to say, Richard, good morning to you.
Morning.
You're down in Sydney. I've had a lump in my throat this morning and I didn't even know her, and as I say, you knew her extremely well. You've actually, because of all the closeness that you were to Olivia Newton-John, you've actually managed to have a word with John Travolta this morning, haven't you?
I texted John early on. Yeah, good morning, Richard. Good morning, Charlotte. Good morning, one and all. Yeah, I texted John. I mean, it's one of the great anomalies, one of the weird things about the job I do and you do when something like this happens. It was almost exactly 12 hours ago that I got the phone call from one of our producers who told me the terrible news. And you grab your black tie and you go to work and talk about Olivia all day, and you find yourself reaching out to various people. But most of the people around her who you would expect and who you'd like to hear from aren't ready to talk publicly, and such is the nature of social media these days, of course, that people are issuing statements. But aside from that, a lot of people are talking. John is just heartbroken. He's too raw to talk. They, of course, shared an enormously close bond after starring in one of the world's most loved movies together from 1978. But yeah, he and the family, Olivia leaves such a great hole in the world, not just her music and her iconic film performances, but here in Australia and around the world. She shared her battle with cancer very publicly and was a beacon of hope for millions of others around the world. And of course, she created the Olivia Newton-John Cancer and Wellness Centre in Melbourne. She's left behind a cancer and wellness centre in her name that will benefit hundreds of thousands of people to time immemorial. Incredible.
Yeah, we were talking to Jane Seymour, actually, the actress, earlier, and she said she'd visited there and she was sort of talking about this amazing positivity that Olivia had. I mean, we can see that it's hit you hard. You knew her well. How did you first meet? How did you first become friends with her?
Well, I was a fan, of course, growing up in little old New Zealand. I had my transistor radio listening to her songs. 1978, when the movie came out, my little band got booked to play at the Grease after party, little knowing it was a 50s. I hadn't done my research. We went in there playing all original material. It was a disaster. But when I came to Australia and started working in the business, we, crossed paths. I would interview her many times. I hosted for a dozen years or so the G'day USA annual festivities in Los Angeles when they, create, it's a tourism and industry mutually beneficial situation. And Olivia was always top of the wish list to turn up to that. So we shared a lot of times there. I dated her niece for a couple of years, so she was Auntie Olivia for a while, and that was obviously a very close time. And most recently, just before COVID hit, my son Christian and her daughter Chloe, were in our version of Dancing with the Stars together, and we were when are you going? I'm going. I'm coming back to. I think that was the last time she was in the country because, of course, when COVID hit, she wanted to, keep to herself.
I have to say, as Charlotte here says, we had a lovely conversation actually with Jane Seymour, who was a very close friend of Olivia. And what I wanted to ask you is the same question that I put to her, and I've been putting to everybody this morning who knew Olivia Newton-John. It's a very simple question, but it makes people step back a little and consider, what was she like as a person?
She was just a beautiful, warm, wonderful, loving person. She just radiated goodness. She was just a decent, wonderful human being who was just there for everybody all the time. She was so generous. If she was in your studio or our studio or walking down the street, everybody always used to go, Olivia, Here in Australia, I know she was born in your country, but you only needed to listen to her accent to know that Australia was home to her. And we just loved her. It was always our Olivia, and Aussies are very, very proud of the people that we make our own. But she was just a good person. She was immensely proud of her achievements. She was a dame. She had 4 Grammys. She sold millions of records and had hit movies. She was incredibly proud of that. But at the core of it all, she was just a good, decent, solid, wonderful person, a real human being.
Something that I actually put to Jane Seymour, I'd like to put it to you as well. I personally find that one of the most attractive things about attractive people is that they don't know they're attractive. They never quite understand the beauty that others see in them. And she was such a beautiful woman. Did she realise quite how beautiful she was? Did she know?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, Richard, because I interviewed her many times. When her then ex-boyfriend Patrick, went missing off the boat and various things, if ever she was having a function or there was something, she'd always ring me. We're going walking on the Great Wall of China. Can you come? It's like, what are you doing? I think I made it for the end of it. She said, oh, that's typical. You turn up for the after party. But I mean, I always said to her, and it was kind of a cliche question, but I couldn't help, and I must have asked her a dozen times. I said, "Do you realise how much you are loved, Olivia?" And she said, "Yeah, I do realise that." And she did. She went knowing how much of an impact, because she gave people hope. People with cancer, with other illnesses. If Olivia Newton-John, she was open, she was honest about her battles, and. I think a lot of people who were also suffering saw Olivia and drew great hope and strength from what she was going through.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your memories with us.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, because obviously we can see that it's upsetting news for you, having known her so well. So we do appreciate you joining us this morning, Richard. Thank you.
And I loved what John Travolta said in his opening statement, that we'll be together again one day. And I love that note of almost spiritual hope.
Yes.
That was a nice thing to say.